Well, while we are trickling in for the next like 5 minutes, what we normally do is a round of introductions. And we do that popcorn style. So we'll say our name, our pronouns, where we're calling in from if we feel comfortable sharing, and what we're going to be working on tonight while we read. So I can start. Um, I'm Maya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from Arlington, Vermont, Southern Vermont, and I will pass it to Ryan. Oh, and I'm working on knitting.
I'm Ryan. I use he, him pronouns. I'll be reading a lot tonight, and I'm currently trying to figure out how to do something on Zoom. I'll pass it to Anissa.
Hey, I'm Anissa, she, her pronouns in Highland Park here in LA. And I'm working on a moth, still my embroidery. I'm gonna pass it off to Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee. I use she, her pronouns. And I just got in from Hoogling. So I'm working on relaxing and learning. Patty Dangler.
Hi, I'm Patty, she, her, and you guys gave me a bee to work on. I'm working on a bee. I'm embroidering it. Jen already talked?
No, I did.
Good.
Hi, I'm Jen, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Studio City. And I am still working on my native bee, one stitch at a time. And I will pass it to Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy in West Covina. I use she, her pronouns. And I am also working on a bee embroidery, which I don't have with me, but I'll get it in a few, or I'll get it by the end of the evening. Let's go with Vicky.
Hi, I'm Vicky. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm just working on an embroidery project that they sent me of avocados, and I'm in Santa Monica, California. And how about Emily Lacey?
Hi, I'm Emily here, she, her pronouns in Echo Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. And happy to be with you all for this great reading series and embroidery series. I'm going to be mostly listening, but I may break out some watercolors possibly. We'll see. Okay, let me pass it to Matthew. Matthew, have you introduced yourself?
Matthew, and Laurel's here too, and we're calling in from Santa Cruz, and we're just kind of listening while we do other things. I'm gonna pass it to. I have no clue who's gone. I'm sorry. Did Vicky go?
Vicky did go. If it's easier, or if you're on your phone, sometimes it's hard to see.
Yeah, it's really hard to circle through all that. Sorry.
Here, we'll pass it off for you so you don't have to scramble.
Thank you.
Thank you for introducing yourself, Matthew. I will pass it off to Ansu.
Hello, my name is Ansu. First time here, she, hers, calling in from Palms. Here to learn, here to participate. Wish I had an embroidery project. You all make me think of my grandmother who taught me embroidery, but I think the best I can do is maybe fold some clothes or yoga, but very happy to be here. Can you pass it on to somebody else for me?
Sure, I'll pass it off to one more and then we'll
Thank
get.
you.
How about Tuan? I hope, correct me if I'm saying your name wrong, Tuan.
That's correct. Hi, I'm Tuan. I'm calling, my pronouns are she, hers, and her, and I'm calling in from downtown LA. Should I pass it on?
I think I'm gonna collect the pass-ons for now so we can get started with the reading. And for folks who didn't get the chance to introduce themselves who would like to, please feel free to do so in the chat. And the chat you can use at any point in the reading too, so that is your platform. I'll get started with our introduction. Hi, everybody, welcome. I'm excited to see all of your faces. Welcome to the Fires of the West Learning and Native Plant Embroidery Zoom gathering hosted by the Metabolic Studio. Since the last presidential election, Lauren Bond and the Metabolic Studio have held a potluck, protest printmaking workshop, and community crafting space every Thursday to process collectively the various traumas of this time. And with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, we shifted gears, obviously, and created this Zoom space to educate ourselves on critical issues by reading and holding discussions while we craft. So we spent the first 12 weeks of this Zoom gathering focused on prison and police abolition. And this current series is dedicated to educating ourselves about the fires of the West, with a specific focus on native land management and sovereignty, the history of fire suppression, and how we can decolonize our understanding of fire moving forward to create a safer and more resilient West. So many of you here have already received embroidery kits in the mail. In that kit, you'll have received a line drawing on fabric of a botanical plant representing the food and medicine that Metabolic grows on 2 studio sites along the LA River, as well as up in Payahunadu, so-called Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals its water, and in Vermont as an effort to give away free food to folks in need right now. We drew images of the plants we're growing, transferred them onto fabric, which we sent out to you all with embroidery hoop, needle, and thread. And in the kit, you'll have also received a self-addressed return envelope with postage. So when you finish that embroidery, you can return it to the studio and it will eventually be formed into a hybrid object. So if you have not yet received an embroidery kit and you're interested in one, please put your name in the chat and Jen will reach out to you and we'll get that going for you. Oh, actually, sorry, I think she just put in the chat, you can send your name and mailing address to info@metabolicstudio.org. She just wrote that email in the chat. So tonight we're going to be reading a study entitled Fire on the Mountain, Rethinking Forest Management in the Sierra Nevada. That was done by the Little Hoover Commission in 2018. And we just kind of, for some housekeeping, we've decided to close entrance to this Zoom space after the first 15 minutes of the reading to create a better flow for discussion at the end. So for anyone who'd like to read, or sorry, this stuff, I'm having my brain has been
it's been a really long week
long
here.
So yeah, feeling a bit loopy, but that is just forewarning that we're going to close the space. And then also, secondly, if anyone would like to read the text out loud with us today, I'm going to put that text in the chat and you can either unmute yourself and let us know, or just put your name in the chat as well. There's the link to the reading, and here are the sections that we're going to be reading. Great. We'll get started.
You gonna start on your computer with the reading, or holding your computer?
I think we're only going to read it on my computer.
Okay, cool.
Oh, are you saying you want to? Okay, sorry. Here you go. Here's the title.
Awesome. Do we start on page 15, right?
I can show you where the sections are.
12, 18. Okay, cool. All right. Here we go. Fire on the Mountain, Rethinking Forest Management in the Sierra Nevada. And I have to go down to chapter.
So published in 2018, just to reiterate, this is a fairly recent study.
It's always interesting when we were reading these texts on fires, because they're like the biggest fire in California history, which was a couple years ago they're referencing, but they don't know about what happened this year. Anyways, the tree mortality crisis as an introduction to forest management in California. The Sierra Nevada is home to stunning national parks, the country's largest alpine lake, and giant sequoias, among the world's largest trees and the planet's oldest living things. It is celebrated for its beauty and recreational opportunities, but also provides a critical element of California's natural resources infrastructure. The region supplies 60% of the state's developed water, including the State Water Project, much of the Central Valley Water Project, and the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Its roughly 10 million forested acres, or 25% of the state's landmass, are an important source of carbon storage in California. Every Californian benefits in one way or another from the Sierra Nevada, making it one of the state's most important resources. Yet the Sierra Nevada also is home to a disaster, partially of our own making, the largest tree die-off in recent memory, the result of bad policy mixed with national forest conditions, meeting worst-case weather conditions. The tree mortality crisis, 129 million trees dead and counting. In just 8 years, California has lost more than 129 million trees, conifers primarily, to the tree mortality crisis, enveloping the southern and central Sierra Nevada. This crisis differs from the other tree mortality episodes due to its vast range, the speed at which it has spread, and the devastation it has inflicted. Though trees began dying in 2010, officials began describing the crisis in 2014 as unprecedented. Nearly 8 million trees died between 2010 and 2014. Another 3.3 million died in 2014. 29 million died in 2015, and 62 million died in 2016, with about 2 million more a month dying in 2017. How we arrived here: policy plus drought plus bark beetle. California arrived at this devastation through the interplay of forest management policies that created overgrown and overcrowded forests, historic drought, and bark beetle pervasive in the state's forest. Fire suppression led to overcrowding, less forest diversity. A century-old policy of putting out all fires, known as fire suppression, has created overcrowded forests. Before European settlement, naturally ignited fires, and those lit by Native Americans, cleared the forests of debris that could cause severe fires. These events and practices also checked the growth of new trees that would compete with older, bigger trees. The result, said Jim Bronham, executive director of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, a state agency that works to improve the well-being of the Sierra Nevada region, was a, quote, very diverse landscape of open, closed, young, and old forests, end quote. This diversity is essential to forest resiliency and helps forests survive a variety of threats. Fire suppression began to dominate land management policies following a series of devastating fires encountered by westward expanding settlers. The 1871 Peshtigo fire killed about 1,500 people in Wisconsin and Michigan when slash and burn fires for both farming and railroad construction met a windy cold front, creating a deadly firestorm. In 1902, the Yakult fire in Washington and Oregon killed 38 people. When the 1910 Big Burn in Washington, Idaho, and Montana killed 86 people, burned 3 million acres, and destroyed an estimated 8 billion board feet of timber, enough to build 800,000 houses. The federal government implemented legislation in response to these disasters and put policies in place for fire suppression. This included the 1911 Weeks Act, which funded state fire prevention and suppression efforts. This effort essentially quashed experiments of preceding decades when settlers in California and elsewhere in the West and South used Native American methods of prescribed burning, known as light burning, as part of land management. Eventually, all fire was viewed as a threat to the forest, and the debate was resolved in favor of aggressive fire control, end quote. wrote U.S. Forest Service officials. In 1926, U.S. Fire Services rules required that all fires be controlled before they exceed 10 acres. In 1935, it adopted its 10 a.m. policy, in which sufficient resources were to be assigned to fires to put them out by 10 a.m. the next day. California fires burned approximately 4.5 million acres annually in California. In comparison, between 1950 and 1999, fires burned about 250,000 acres annually, less than 6% of the historical average. Within a few years, the natural fire regime in which Sierra forests evolved and thrived largely ceased. I think, did Nick want to read? Did I see something like that?
Yeah.
Nick, do you want to start reading? Do you know where we are?
Sure. Historic drought. California's historic drought greatly weakened Sierra forests. When overcrowded forests encounter drought, more trees compete for less water and leave the trees vulnerable to disease and insects. Drought also reduces moisture in fuels littering the forest floor, increasing wildfire risk. It reduces relative humidity and makes trees more likely to die from wildfire and at lower temperatures than healthier trees normally would withstand. Further, snowpacks are reduced and melt sooner, extending the length of the fire season. Enter the bark beetle. Forest overcrowding, drought, and the bark beetle created a perfect storm for tree mortality. There are 600 species of bark beetle in the United States, about a dozen of which reproduce in California's conifers. The bark beetles at the heart of this crisis are native to California's forests and play a critical role in the ecosystem. They process decaying wood from dead and dying trees and turn it into nutrients needed for regrowth. This helps trees decompose and new ones to take their place. The problem is not that these beetles are here. Wholesale eradication of these beetles would be catastrophic for the ecosystem. The problem is an ecosystem where nature's delicate balance has been knocked askew by policy and drought, which created conditions for the beetles to overrun the trees. Bark beetles bore into trees to reproduce. They tunnel into a tree and lay eggs at the end of the tunnel. Many species release a fungus that converts the tree's tissues into food for the larvae when the eggs hatch. A healthy tree will release sap or pitch to push the bark beetle out of the tree. A drought-stressed tree will be unable to produce this sap, however, allowing beetles to successfully lay their eggs. Worse, upon reproducing, beetles release a pheromone that attracts swarms of other beetles to the tree. Trees cannot withstand thousands of beetles depositing thousands of eggs within them. Even more deadly, thirsty trees often release a gas into their trunk to try to trick roots into pulling in more water. The gas acts as a pheromone for bark beetles, attracting still more beetles to the weakened tree. The end result is 129 million dead trees and counting. The local impact. The immediate public health and safety impact has fallen squarely on the communities in the Sierra Nevada. Dead and drying trees threaten people, homes, infrastructure, and evacuation routes. Officials call these hazard trees. The state is now working to remove hazard trees from areas under its jurisdiction, while local officials and homeowners are doing the same, but with far less available money. Funding challenges. Lack of adequate funding presents the largest challenge to protecting public safety. Governor Brown's 2018-19 proposed budget included nearly $100 million for CAL FIRE to perform forest management activities through its resources management function and its vegetation management program. Though $100 million is not an insignificant sum, it is but a drop in the bucket of the proposed $2.1 billion budget. In September 2017, Governor Brown signed a bill delivering $220 million in cap and trade funding to CAL FIRE for healthy forest and fire prevention programs. But the department simultaneously lost an estimated annual $80 million in state responsibility area fees due to suspension of that program through 2030. The governor has proposed another $160 million in cap and trade funding for healthy forests in 2018-19. Local funding is more precarious, the commission learned. Many counties affected rely on California Disaster Assistance Act funding, which provides a 25% match for work completed on public rights of way. In a February 2017 meeting with commission staff, Supervisor Randy Hanvelt of Tuolumne County explained the toll this takes on
just
county homeowner budgets.
that word's gonna come up a couple more times. Tuolumne is the name of the. It's
Tuolumne? Thank you.
Mhm.
That's great. Thank you. Quote, when we initially realized we had a problem, we assessed the trees along the 600 miles of county roads in Tuolumne County and determined that there were approximately 9,000 hazard trees on those roads. At a conservative estimate of $1,000 per tree for removal, we were looking at $9 million for roadside tree removal. At a 25% match for disaster assistance funding, that's $2.25 million that we had to come up with out of our reserves. Our reserves were 2.3 million, so the entirety of our reserves had to go just for the match. There are 1,200 miles of roads that are not in the county system. These are considered privately owned. The people who live along these roads are at risk, but they don't have the money to remove those trees, and there is no CDAA funding for that. And the tree mortality grows and grows every day. We estimate that we now have $30 million worth of tree removal. We are oversubscribed on our reserves and the devil is at our door, end quote. A bill in the California State Legislature, SB 265, 2017 Berry Hill, would have reduced the CDAA match from 25% to 10% if it had passed. The bill failed to make it out of committee, however. Okay, I'll pass it back.
Great, thank you. We before we passed it off to you, there was a section, a little blurb that we wanted to read about forest health and resiliency. That was a sidebar. So I'll read that and then I'm going to pass it off to Rowena, who also wants to read tonight. The forest health and resiliency. There is a danger of treating forests as if they have human characteristics by thinking of them in terms of forest health instead of forest resiliency. Scientists cautioned the commission. The commission understands this concern and in most cases uses the term resiliency. However, this report predominantly is aimed at non-scientists for whom the term forest health is more intuitive than forest resiliency. For ease of messaging, the commission at times uses the terms interchangeably. UC Berkeley's Scott Steffens defined forest resiliency for the commission as, quote, the ability of an ecosystem to absorb impacts before a threshold is reached where the system changes into a different state, such as forest changing to a large shrubland after a severe wildfire. The Tree Mortality Task Force further outlined the following characteristics of a resilient forest. Diversity. Healthy forests include a range of natural growth stages, as well as naturally occurring species of flora, fauna, and microbiota. Generally, insect and disease populations target one type or species of tree. A diversity of species will help reduce the possibility of one insect or disease killing all the trees in a region. Control of a non-native invasive species will also encourage naturally occurring species. Capacity. With enough space, sunlight, nutrients, and water, trees have the capacity to grow and thrive. They become stressed when lacking these elements, which makes them more susceptible to attack by insects and diseases, as well as large-scale disturbances such as drought or wildfire. They are also stressed by rapid and dramatic change, such as being broken up through nearby land activities or climate patterns that reduce water or elevate air temperatures. Complexity. Forest complexity includes the naturally occurring range of tree species and the presence of shrubs, meadows, open ground, and natural regeneration. Managing for greater natural complexity generally improves a forest's ability to respond to disturbances and supports wildlife that feed on insects that may be attacking trees. Fire adapted. For millions of years, California's forests have evolved with fire. Healthy, resilient forests both survive and benefit from fire, which is natural and necessary to a healthy forest ecosystem. Forests that experience appropriate frequencies and severities of fire or other vegetation treatment practices that mimic fire are more likely to support species that will survive wildfire and other disturbances. Intact. Forest landscapes that are not impacted by land development or human-caused change to tree and vegetation species allow ecological processes to occur at their natural historic pace. So now we're gonna go to where we just left off, which is page 15, heightened risk of severe wildfire. I saw it, Rowena. If you see this section, let me know if that's coming up for you.
I found it.
Okay, great.
Heightened risk of severe wildfire. Though the tree mortality crisis does not itself cause wildfires, stands of dead trees and buildup of forest fuels heighten the threat of catastrophic fires. Unchecked underbrush burns hotter when it ignites and provides a ladder for fires to climb into mature trees. Trees that historically thrived in the Sierra developed defenses against low-intensity wildfire. Their bark can withstand lower temperature fire, and they shed their lower branches so that surface fire cannot climb into the treetops. But as tree canopies fill in, shade-tolerant trees begin to thrive, and they are less fire resistant. Further, accumulated underbrush allows fire to overcome those defenses and burn hotter and climb into the tree canopy. Crown fires that burn at and move along treetops are the hardest to suppress due to an unlimited supply of fuel. Crown fire behavior is unpredictable and kills most of the trees in its path. Sierra Nevada acreage burned by high severity fires rose from 17% in 1984 to 30% in 2006 due to overcrowded forests filled with unhealthy trees. The impact of varying forest management policies on wildfire can be seen in the 2013 Rim Fire that ravaged Tuolumne and Mariposa counties. Researchers learned how the fire behaved differently depending on the maintenance history. Areas that were up to date on management moderated the impacts of the Rim Fire on communities, human safety, and natural resources. Put simply, properly managing forests saves lives and property and helps preserve the forests that provide so many benefits to Californians. Water quality. The tree mortality crisis also continues to spotlight the degradation occurring in Sierra watersheds that supply so much of the state's water for farms and urban areas. Overgrown forests release less water for these needs. A Nature Conservancy report found that thinning forests to make them healthier could increase downstream water yields by up to 6%. The loss of diverse habitats under current management practices includes the loss of valuable meadows. Meadows absorb and hold water and release it later in the year when it's most needed. Overgrown forests also trap more of the annual snowpack in their higher branches, causing it to evaporate rather than reach the ground and flow downhill to water storage facilities. Wildfire has an especially negative impact on these critical watersheds. Eric Coyne, Tulare County Deputy County Administrative Officer for Economic Development, Film and Tourism, painted the following picture for the commission. Quote, "The rough fire hit Fresno and parts of Tulare hard. You've got the standing vertical load that creates a wall of fire. It burns so hot, so long, that instead of seeing scorched earth, you see moonscape. Nothing is able to grow there for well over a decade. It's sterile. It can't support life. So you've had your first hit, which is to air quality. Then it starts raining. You've lost all of the binders, and this hill is just going to come down because there's no root system or anything to hold it. It washes into the watershed and then is carried down to the valley floor in the water system, and you get all the contaminants in there.
Dave Egerton, general manager of the Calaveras County Water District, similarly described the negative impacts of poor forest management on the Calaveras watershed and consequences for CCWD ratepayers. Soil erosion, particularly following the 2015 Butte fire, severely degraded water quality, he told commission staff. The watershed looks like a milkshake, and treating it costs millions of dollars, he said, but not treating it would negatively impact downstream users, particularly the more than 300,000 residents living in the city of Stockton. The Placer County Water District likewise dredged its water infrastructure several times to cope with the runoff of sediment in the wake of the 2014 King Fire. Ashley Conrad Seda, Deputy Secretary for Cal EPA, told commission staff. Finally, the scale of firestorms that have grown ever more common in recent years scorch of Sierra Nevada soils into hardpan, blocking their natural function of capturing water and replenishing aquifers at lower elevations. In short, healthy forests benefit all Californians, but mostly the locals bear immediate costs of forest mismanagement. All Californians benefit from healthy forests that supply fresh water, clean the air, and store carbon. But it is the small mountain towns, the local rural areas that lack strong economies, lucrative tax bases, and concentrated political power that are bearing the economic brunt of tree mortality crisis. Their lives, property, and infrastructure are threatened by dead and dying trees and the consequences of massive wildfires. Their insurance rates are increasing. They are the ones spending their financial reserves to dredge local water infrastructure. It is their budgets being depleted to address the widespread local impacts. Across a multitude of study topics, the Little Hoover Commission has long stressed the importance of trust in government. Here it is relevant again. Local communities often have little say in how the forests around them are managed, yet they bear the immediate costs and consequences for mismanagement. Towns in the Sierra Nevada are fertile ground for taxpayer resentment of government, their grievances a corrosive obstacle to facilitating trust in the public sector, whether at City Hall, the county courthouse, or the state capitol. Trust in government is just one of the important reasons the state of California must take every action available to restore the forests within its borders to resiliency. How the state is responding to the tree mortality crisis. Governor Brown declared a state of emergency in response to the crisis in October 2015. His declaration issued 19 directives to help the state address first the public safety hazard presented by the crisis. Some of the directives also focused on longer-term options to make use of the dead trees once removed from the forest. These directives can be viewed in Appendix C. CAL FIRE, the Office of the Governor, and the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, CAL OES, formed a task force in November 2015, the Tree Mortality Task Force, to implement the directives in the state of emergency and coordinate with other levels of government. It comprises approximately 80 state, federal, tribal, and local agencies, utility companies, nonprofit organizations, and other stakeholders. To implement the governor's directives, the task force identified the following statewide goals. Provide coordination among agencies and entities. Establish and focus efforts on high hazard zones. Identify funding sources. Reduce regulatory impediments. Provide public education. Expand the use of bioenergy. Identify potential storage and utilization sites. Distribute equipment across counties, and work to identify and promote local wood markets. The task force has identified the following high hazard zones to guide the state's response to the crisis, shown on the next page. And then there's a map that shows the high hazard zones
throughout the Sierra Nevada. Should I continue?
Totally. If you feel like continuing, you totally can. We can also pass it along, either whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, I'm happy to continue as long as just let me know when to stop.
Whenever you're ready, you can stop and let us know.
Okay.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like when the reading section, yeah, we'll let you know when you reach page 18. That's
Okay, great.
Sections.
The tree mortality crisis is a symptom of larger problem. This commission report goes beyond the tree mortality crisis and notes it is merely a symptom of the state's larger forest management problem. Millions of dead trees are the consequence of bad policy combined with bad luck. While the scale of the tree death is unprecedented, the state failed to take the aggressive actions necessary to prevent the crisis. Officials have long known that California's forests are overgrown and that the state's climate is getting hotter and drier. They know too that the public safety threats posed by dead and dying trees, the depleted local and personal budgets, the millions of taxpayer dollars spent in response to the crisis, and the number of staff hours across nearly 80 agencies and organizations responding to the crisis is just the beginning, unless California invests fully in forest management. Scientists have long established that California will become drier and that climate change will increase the number and intensity of wildfires. Forest experts have long sounded the alarm that insects and disease threaten 25% of California's forests. Officials recognize the impact of the state's overgrown forests. With this information in front of California's leaders, there are no excuses for inaction. A broader long-term focus on forest management.
Actually, Rowena, I think this is where I was gonna hop over, or you can hop over to page 34.
Sure, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, great. I'll just read page 34 and then I'm gonna hand it off to Ansu. Thank you so much.
Isn't the pen, aren't you glazing over this?
Yeah, but I think we seem to be good on time, so maybe we can read a bit of it.
Yeah.
Okay, 34. Cool. The benefits of using prescribed fire. There are numerous advantages to prescribed fire. It can return forests to their natural fire-adapted state. It can remove the buildup of forest fuels, further decreasing the risk of catastrophic wildfire. Fires that burn in areas that already have been burned become naturally self-limiting, testified Dr. Stevens, because fuel loads are very low. 90% of fires that try to burn in an area burned 9 or fewer years ago extinguish on their own. I just think that's a really critical percentage that I'm going to read again. 90% of fires that try to burn in an area that burned 9 or fewer years ago extinguish on their own. That's wild. Similarly, lighter fuel loads and reduced crown consumption result in fewer emissions, noted US Forest Service and UC Davis scientists in a 2017 research paper. If the 2013 Rim Fire, among the largest in California history, had burned in areas with recent prior fires, its emissions would have been reduced by an estimated 48%. Intentional fire can be used strategically to help fight catastrophic wildfires. Decades of managed fire in Yosemite National Park provided opportunities to suppress the Rim Fire. Finally, there are drought resilience and water supply implications associated with using prescribed fire. Dr. Stevens testified that managed fire within Yosemite resulted in less tree mortality and higher or unchanged stream output from the watershed. 3 controlled watersheds with no managed fire show less stream output during that time. Many leaders, such as CAL FIRE Director Pimlott, believe that in some areas it would be appropriate to mechanically thin fuels before reintroducing fire. But while mechanical thinning can help reduce fuels, there are ecological processes it cannot replicate. Note scientists Malcolm North, Brandon Collins, and Scott Stevens, such as nutrient cycling and understory and microclimate diversity, among many others. Dr. Stevens cautioned the commission, however, that strategic mechanical treatments still represent an improvement over no treatments at all. Without action, the problem will only worsen. Not only will the status quo continue, with forests continuing to crowd themselves and fuels continuing to build, but because of climate change, wildfires are expected to grow in size and intensity. The threats of forests will be greater. Already an expensive problem, waiting to take action will only increase the costs and the consequences to Californians. Okay, so now we're gonna hop over to page 39. And Ansu, do you wanna read from there? Cool. So we're starting at challenges to using.
Page 39.
Yes, page 39, challenges
Still
to
scrolling. Yeah. 37.
And then we'll read from 39, and we can kind of decide when we want to stop, but we're potentially going to 45. So if you get there, you get there. And if you're exhausted, you don't have to keep going.
You want me to start where it says challenges to using prescribed fire, right?
Yes, exactly.
Beyond the impediments outlined by CAL FIRE, there are safety, financial, and environmental challenges to increasing the number and duration of prescribed fires. Oops, lost my place. Hold on. 39. Sorry about that.
Weird. It goes straight to human encroachment on forests after that.
Human encroachment on forests, yes. As of 2010, California had about 4.5 million homes located in wilderness areas. These populated forest areas are called Wildland Urban Interface, or WUI. Experts acknowledge they are particularly vulnerable to wildfire. A map on the next page shows the distribution of homes in wilderness areas in California. The home building expansion into the state's wildlands has greatly increased in recent years. The population within the Sierra Nevada doubled between 1970 and 1990, and it is expected to triple between 1990 and 2040. Many residents of these settlements have concerns about intentional burning near their homes. Prescribed fire in these areas is restricted, testified Director Pimlott, and allowing natural fires to burn is a non-starter due to the threat to life and property. Fire experts state that the goal of burning in or near these populated areas could not be replicating California's historic fire ecosystem, but instead must focus on containing and suppressing catastrophic fires. Ms. Britting noted that fears of fire escaping prescribed burns are not backed up with data. While it occasionally happens, she testified, it is rare. Between 1996 and 2004, there were only 30 escaped fires or near misses on national forest lands, for example. Another study looked at the 16,626 prescribed fires, treating 1,971,823 acres nationwide in 2012, and found only 14 escaped fires. The best way to prevent a prescribed fire escape, Ms. Britting testified, is to ensure there are well-trained and experienced practitioners in charge and a prescribed fire support team that effectively uses weather and other biophysical data to evaluate fire in real time. On the ground conditions. On a practical level, land managers face many on-the-ground conditions that can determine whether or not a prescribed fire happens. This includes workforce availability, fuel moisture and weather, and safe burn conditions. As noted above, there are a number of groups working to identify barriers to burning on available burn days. These include working groups within the Fire MOU Partnership, air and land managers meetings, and the prescribed fire down past the map, prescribed fire working group within the Tree Mortality Task Force. The Commission urges the state to encourage its personnel to participate in these efforts to the fullest and for policymakers to implement the recommendations that these groups develop. Costs associated with prescribed burning. One deterrent to prescribed fire is the cost. Quite simply, prescribed burns cost money to plan and implement, and they do not result in a product that can be sold to offset those costs. However, policymakers must consider the other alternatives before deciding not to invest in prescribed fire. Researchers found that prescribed burns on U.S. Forest Service and national park land averaged approximately $145 an acre and $206 an acre, respectively. In contrast, without considering the long-term costs to the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals or to public health, they found that controlling unmanaged wildfire averaged approximately $830 an acre on the Forest Service land in their study area and $496 an acre on national park land. Further, through mechanical thinning, though mechanical thinning can result in a saleable product, conducting it in a way that promotes resilient forests, that is, removing small diameter trees and other plants, is not always profitable. In the study noted above, the researchers found that mechanical thinning contracts on U.S. Forest Service land averaged 3.5 times more than prescribed fire, largely due to the removal of small biomass that could not be sold. Further, land must be maintained after initial treatments, which means that mechanical treatment costs can increase because the larger, high-value trees have already been removed. Strategic planning can reduce the cost of prescribed burning in some instances, however. Projects can be designed so prescribed burns are paired with profitable mechanical harvesting, with the income from the harvesting offsetting the cost of the burns, at least in part. Doing that at the landscape level, experts noted, would allow for a predictable supply of forest materials for mills and bioenergy plants, solving one of the impediments to investment in wood processing infrastructure. However, the fact remains that prescribed burns by themselves are a costly activity and one in which the state should invest given the benefits to forest resiliency. Carbon sequestration. Trees pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as part of the process of photosynthesis, consequently playing an important role in carbon sequestration. Forests are California's largest carbon sink, or area that absorbs and stores more carbon than it emits. Some are concerned about prescribed fire because burning fuels results in the loss of stored carbon. But as with other impediments to prescribed fire, it is important to look at the trade-offs. The disturbances to California's unhealthy forests threaten to turn them into net carbon emitters. In 2010, California's above-ground plants contained about 898 million metric tons of carbon, with forests accounting for 892 million metric tons of that stored amount. Approximately 1,603 million metric tons are stored in other carbon pools, such as root systems. Between 2001 and 2010, wildfire accounted for approximately 120 million metric tons of an estimated 180 million metric tons of carbon loss due to disturbances during this time frame. Further, post-wildfire emissions can be up to 5 times greater than those released during the fire. Wildfires are not the only threat to forests, however. In his testimony to the Commission, Mr. Branham stated that his agency estimates that in 2016, 53 million metric tons, or equivalent to the annual emissions of 11 million cars, of live tree carbon shifted to the dead pool due to tree mortality from beetles and drought, meaning it will be released as the tree decomposes. In the past, the state counted on tree regrowth to once again boost carbon sequestration. However, scientists now observe that some areas burned in high-severity fires are growing back as shrublands or grasslands, which store less than 10% of the carbon than their predecessor forests. Forests killed by the bark beetle take longer to return to a carbon sink than forests killed by other disturbances. Even without disaster, overcrowded forests can stunt tree growth rates, which slows rates of carbon sequestration. This matters because large trees actively sequester more carbon on an annual basis than smaller trees. One recent study in the Sierra Nevada found that over a 10-year period, areas of forests that were treated sequestered more carbon, while the untreated areas lost carbon. In short, California has taken enormous strides to reduce its greenhouse gases and sequester carbon, and it could lose all of that work by continuing to neglect its forests. So while prescribed burns could result in some carbon loss in the short term, creating resilient forests will have long-term gains for Californians. And I'll hand it back.
Awesome. I can take over if you want.
Yeah, do you want to do the
Air quality?
yeah, do you want to do the brief, like you can read a section of it?
Oh, you're good at that.
Okay, cool, I'll do that.
All right, Maya's gonna read.
I'm gonna do a kind of bulletproof version so we can have some time to discuss. Did I say bulletproof?
Yeah.
I meant bullet point, sorry. My brain is fried a bit this week. Because we're thinking that maybe Joe Biden might talk at 10.
There's a chance that Joe Biden might give a speech at 10 tonight.
Or 10 our time. So we're on the East Coast. So that would be 7 y'all's time. So we were thinking if that does happen, if we all wanted, we could screen share and watch it together.
It wouldn't be a victory speech unless he's declared the winner, but he wants to give a speech about like the progress and what's been happening and stuff.
So we'll see when we get there, but I'll kind of gloss over these last sections so that we can get to discussion. So air quality, these are still the detriments, or like these are the issues with prescribed burning. Air quality concern. Air quality concerns are among the biggest impediments to prescribed burning because smoke contains particulate matter that is especially harmful because of its small size. Called PM 2.5, this particulate matter is less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter, allowing it to penetrate the body's defense system and infiltrate the respiratory system. Additionally, there is an economic impact from smoke. Many Californians use forests as a vehicle for recreation, and smoke from prescribed fires impacts visibility as well as health. This can negatively affect recreation and tourism. California Air Pollution Control Officers Association Executive Director Alan Abbs testified that air districts face immense federal and state pressure to meet air quality standards. While wildfires do not count against air quality standards, prescribed fires do. Many air districts have enacted regulations to reduce emissions from other places when air quality is poor, or providing incentives to replace older wood heating devices, said Mr. Abbs. Still, with many air districts still struggling to meet particulate matter regulations, he said, increasing both the number and duration of burns likely will increase monitoring and modeling. Monitoring air quality. One obstacle to prescribed burning is the current inability to make burn/no burn decisions on a small geographic basis. California has an extensive stationary monitoring network, meaning that high quality monitors reside in fixed locations. The majority of these monitors are near heavily populated areas. This setup may not adequately reflect the areas impacted by prescribed burning. Adding smaller, portable monitors to the monitoring network could give air quality officials a more nuanced picture of potential smoke impacts. CARB has a 30 high-quality portable monitor called Environmental Beta Attenuation Monitor, or EBAMs for short. These provide hourly data for smoke monitoring and often are deployed in wildfire emergencies. Further, CARB received a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency grant to buy 6 more EBAMs that can be shared with local air districts to support prescribed burning. These instruments must be tested in a smoke chamber to determine their accuracy. So how do air regulators authorize prescribed burns? A land manager planning a prescribed burn will create a smoke management plan and submit it to the air district for approval. If the plan is approved, the land manager tentatively plans a window of time to burn. The land manager and air district has access to 96, 62, 48, and 24-hour air quality and meteorological forecasts to determine the likelihood of receiving a burn authorization. The California Air Resources Board Meteorology Section issues daily burn or no burn determinations for each air basin. Local air districts can further refine burn determinations based on local conditions. Air district staffs play a significant role on margin burn days when it is less clear whether burns should or shouldn't happen. Let's see. I'm just going to read this one important quote, which is, by one estimate, wildfire emissions in California are expected to increase by 50% before 2100 unless policymakers make drastic changes to fire use. And those drastic changes include fire suppression, stopping fire suppression the way we do it. Conclusion. In their paper on using fire as a fuels reduction treatment, Drs. North, Collins, and Stevens note that the air quality impacts from unmanaged wildfire often are treated as acts of God, but these are actually the consequences of decisions and actions or inaction that policymakers have made, they contend. California's leaders must take this message to heart. California faces the threat of completely reversing progress on its air quality goals by neglecting its forests, and that would be the consequence of decisions made by people, not something that, quote, just happened to the state. The commission is heartened to see that agency leaders understand this and that there are commitments to begin to restore some of California's historic fire regime to foster forest resiliency and ecosystem health. But this support needs to come from the highest levels of government, the administration and legislature, to ensure departments have the resources they need to go beyond what they're doing and restore California's forests at the landscape level. So these are some final recommendations. They recommend that the state of California should lead a policy shift from fire suppression to using fire as a tool. This should include creating dedicated prescribed fire crews. These job classifications should be designed to attract the state's top talent with pay comparable to non-prescribed fire crews. And they recommend treating the land at the scale outlined in the draft forest carbon plan will require more resources. CAL FIRE, local air districts, and other affected agencies should develop a list of positions they will need To meet the draft forest carbon plan goals of treating 500,000 acres of non-federal land per year, 500,000 acres of USDA Forest Service land per year, and 10,000 to 15,000 acres of Bureau of Land Management land per year. State agencies should assume that at least part of the federal land's acreage treated will be by state entities working under the Good Neighbor Authority and predict their staffing needs accordingly. The legislature should then fund these extra positions, including the positions at the local level. Recommendation 5, the California Air Resources Board, land managers, and other stakeholders should continue to actively work to find ways to increase prescribed burning through better use of technology, including modeling software, traditional portable air quality monitoring, and new low-cost sensor monitoring. Okay, so this is the end of the reading that we had set aside for tonight. There's a lot more in this study.
It's like 80 something pages or like 100 pages.
Yeah, this was the section that felt really super important to me, and Ryan and I read it earlier and we thought it was important to discuss. So what we've been doing is we've been breaking into breakout rooms to have discussion before coming together and having full circle discussions. So those breakout rooms will be 3 people per room, and we'll be in there for 6 minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to read our community guidelines for discussion, which I'm going to put in the chat. And if anyone is likely going to leave before the discussion period, we kindly ask that you maybe choose to leave before or like while we're reading the discussion guidelines, just because Jen is going to have to make the breakout rooms. And if people leave when we go to the breakout rooms, there's people alone in there that end up not having anyone to talk to. Okay, so is there anyone who is wanting to read out loud the community guidelines for discussion here tonight? If not, we've asked our team member Anissa to read them for us. Emily, it seems like you wanted to read. Are you keen on reading them tonight?
Are you fired up to read?
Too.
Great.
Fired up to read these guidelines.
Yay.
Okay, I'll click on the link.
Stop taking my job, Emily. Just kidding.
Okay, here we go. Number 1, we agree not to blame ourselves or others for the misinformation we have learned, but to accept responsibility for not repeating misinformation after we have learned otherwise. Number 2, we agree to listen respectfully to each other without interruptions. Only one person speaks at a time. Number 3, we acknowledge that we may be at different stages of learning on the content and discussion topics. Number 4, we agree that no one should be required or expected to speak for their whole race or gender. We can't, even if we wanted to. Number 5, we will hold each other's best interest at heart. We hope everyone has come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We will trust that people are doing the best they can. Let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. Number 6, share responsibility for including all voices in the discussion. If you have a tendency to dominate discussions, try taking a step back. If you tend to stay quiet, try challenging yourself to share ideas so others can learn from you. Number 7, this is my favorite one. Silence is golden. Sometimes there will be long pauses. Sometimes silence can create space for folks who need that space to come forward. We agree to not fill silences out of discomfort. We will hold this silence with care and move forward intentionally. We welcome those of you whose minds are bursting with ideas to write them in the chat bar. The facilitators, or number 8, the facilitators are not experts. They are here to help facilitate the process. They and everyone in the group are here to learn. Number 9, it's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are all still learning and are bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring new ideas. Be open to changing your mind and make space for others to do so as well. Number 10, the facilitators are not moderators. They are not trained to moderate personal grievances. If discussion stops being about the reading and instead breaches into accusations and aggression, please respect the facilitator switching gears and refocusing on the text. If any of these guidelines are breached, a metabolic team member will reach out to you privately in the chat to provide a reminder. If the guidelines continue to be breached, they will provide a verbal call-in. By staying on this Zoom call, you are agreeing to these community guidelines for your discussion, for our discussion period.
Thank you, Emily. Yay. And now I believe Jen will have our breakout rooms sent out to us shortly.
That's correct. I will assign them right now.
So when you get that, you can accept it, and then you'll be in your breakout room. We can hold discussion, and we'll all come back together and share. And then if we're feeling up to it, we'll watch Joe Biden all together.
If he is talking.
If he shall speak.
If he shall be.
Okay, Maya, we're doing 6 minutes?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right, I sent them out.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I had a really nice discussion with Rowena and Roxanne and Ryan. Ooh, Rowena, Roxanne, Ryan.
And Maya.
And Maya in the breakout room that we just had. So maybe, I hope y'all also had good discussions. I think maybe a great way to handle this main room now would just be like, if anyone wants to share anything that came up, anything that they're thinking about, things that stuck out to them, things they disagreed, you know, any kind of reflection now would be a good time.
Well, I also was in a really great conversation and we got cut off mid-sentence. So I really wanted to pick it up and just hear the end of hear the end of Ansu's sentence. She was talking about the colonization. She wanted to address colonization, and then it went boom, and so we just got into a heart of it. So would it be okay if collectively kind of caught us up with that idea? Okay, cool.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, so my background really is in geography and land management, and I've read like dozens of sort of management documents published by Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, and other agencies like this, and it keeps being very apparent to me that there's a pattern here where something is actually very silent and not mentioned very much, that is at the core of all of this. So we spent a lot of time reading about how different agencies have to, the air quality management agencies have to be consulted with a smoke plan, and then the different local agencies with their watershed management plan. Everything is sort of a Band-Aid fix onto this deeper sort of issue, which is that the massive just difference in the way that the land and water are seen, the relationship of people to the land and water is so different between the Europeans that came to this land and the original people of this land. And so the three causes of this fire that were mentioned were basically the soil moisture. There's just an incredible loss of soil moisture, which has an impact on the sap of trees, on the quality of the trees, and that it affects in turn their ability to withstand infestations by bugs and so forth. And if I think Lauren, you were talking about the San Fernando Valley and its reliance on the Mulholland LA aqueduct. And if there hadn't been this sort of imperialistic way of looking at California, way of being in California, then we wouldn't have this massive like water transport, which wouldn't be desiccating, basically desertifying vast tracts of land and stealing water from, just masses of water that has a rationale, that has an intelligent reason for the way it is across the land. And we've presumed to come and manipulate that and to shift water from here and move it there for human purposes, which completely destroys the integrity of the whole ecological system. And that's the heart of it. We've spent sort of this whole hour like reading this incredible document of strategies of how to mitigate and manage fires. But really the heart of it would be to restore the whole water ecology of California, and that would really get to the heart of it. But usually, in my experience, and I've worked for 20 years in this field, it's we never go to the heart of things, because that would involve re-examining who we are in our relationship to the water and the land. That was what I was going to say, Lauren.
Thank you, Ansu. And I also want to just say that, like, I really think it's critical for us to have that lens of how this is a whole systems approach of, like, the reason, like you mentioned, that bark beetle is even an issue in the first place is because of water. And the last reading I had put before this reading, which we read last week, was about water in the Sierra Nevadas and how our water map is changing, and the projections of water in this year and how that's going to impact this land too. So I was hoping that we'd start with the water and then move on to the forest perspective. Anyway, I just wanted to voice that, like, water is deeply rooted in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that I'm trying to remember this other reading, but it was from Indigenous perspective on how we think about water. And I think Western science has a way of thinking about water as a liquid substance that flows, and it's got a chemical composition. And that's absolutely not the definition of water from other lenses. It's sort of the substance of life, and water is the forest. The tree is part of the water cycle. The tree helps the water in the air to go further inland from the ocean. The tree is like a water fountain, really, and it connects the soil and the air. And that's not the way we think about water. We think about water as a different substance. Water is like trees like a water fountain. Yeah. Exactly. Has anyone ever heard of the book by Peter Wohlleben, The Secret Life of Trees? And I have the young readers edition. It's called Can You Hear the Trees Talking? He's this German forester who wrote this book about this, how trees are so rational, and they have this whole way of being. The Hidden Life of the Forest is the name of the adults book. This is the young readers edition. And you know, it's really remarkable because the water system has a huge influence on the susceptibility and vulnerability of trees to bark, to beetle attacks, and their ability to withstand it. And I mean, the trees are so intelligent; they're always responding to the environment. And when you disturb one thing, you disturb the whole system.
Sorry, Ansu, I was just trying to look it up and I found The Hidden Life of the Forest and The Secret Life of the Forest, and there's a bunch of different ones, so I'm not sure.
The Hidden Life of Trees is the English translation. It's the original German. And so it's by Peter Wohlleben. And then this is the young readers edition. It's called Can You Hear the Trees Talking?
I found that one, but so they're both by Peter Wohlleben. Okay.
Yeah, this is just a younger edition, young people's edition. But the original New York Times bestseller, which is a translation of the German, is called The Hidden Life of Trees, I guess.
Yeah, I found the young one. Discovering the Hidden Life of the Forest is the other one.
Uh-huh.
Maybe, I don't know.
So I think that the historic drought in California is partly, you know, everyone just talks about climate change, but it's really the destruction of our trees, the destruction of our water system that has caused the droughts, because the trees hold the water, and the trees, you know, the air above the foliage and the crown is full of moisture. And when we remove that vegetation, we just break the whole water level in the atmosphere.
Yeah, another really critical reason is because of the lack of controlled and cultural burns. Does anyone here remember from one of our first readings, we read the percentage that the roots are able to actually hold. There's a percent increase of how much roots are able to hold water after a controlled or cultural burn versus when they haven't been burned. I want to say it's 6 times more
it's
water
something
retention,
like mind-blowing,
like staggeringly more able to hold water within their roots after having a controlled and light temperature burn, versus obviously when we have these catastrophic wildfires that reach insane temperatures, like we read today, they sterilize the land and it destroys the life in the soil, but the controlled burns actually create more moisture retention as well. And I think it's really critical to note and to plug that next week we're going to be reading the description from one of the first Spanish colonizers walking through native West Coast land. And it's literally their journal entries of what the land looked like.
Super interesting.
It's super critical to understand that like almost all of this land was control burned every year. And there were very few forests. Like it was very, very few patches of forest land that were maintained, but almost entirely was burned grassland. So that's a really critical read as well to understand like how this landscape has changed. It sucks that we have to read the colonizers' perspective of it because that's what was written. You know, it would be, we're obviously reading other readings as well, but I just thought we should plug that that's kind of an interesting read to see that like how different the land really was managed.
It's also interesting to see, I know this is next week's reading, but I'm excited to share it with y'all or read it with y'all because the person, the colonizer that's writing in his diary is talking about like how beautiful and natural and pure it is and everything, but they don't really realize why it is.
Untouched.
Untouched, yeah, untouched. Which is just like,
well, also when they do notice, just to push back on that narrative, because he's also constantly saying, and then the savages burn X, Y, and Z.
yeah,
and it's like they don't understand.
my point is they don't understand what's happening.
Well, no, but he's saying they don't understand they're destroying their land, but he doesn't understand that that's actually the way to manage that. Anyway, we'll get into this tomorrow or next week.
My point is the colonizer doesn't understand what's happening
at all, has no perspective on how this land works.
So next week we get to hear about mosaic burns.
Kind of. I mean, it's a very specific perspective on just literally the visual landscape. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. But I'll jump in once more just to say the quote that really stuck with me tonight that I'm going to carry with me is that lands that have burned between 9 years or closer are 90% more likely to just burn out. Like if there's another fire that burns there, it'll just burn itself out. That I had no idea that the actual sheer number.
There's a wonderful quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The land is not broken. Our relationship to the land is what is broken. And I think that statistic about the land that has burned, maintaining, restoring its health, and suppressing fire on its own when it has been cared for systematically with the mosaic burns and indigenous practices, is healthy land. Land heals itself when we stop damaging it. And I think Robin Kimmerer's statement is so exquisite in that.
I mean, in Southern California, we have this oak savanna ecology, which you were saying, the grasslands interspersed with these massive keystone species trees. And it's so horrifying to look at the original versus what we have in the whole of like the San Fernando Valley, which was imported trees. And you can just see there's something like, it feels like agroecology, feels like a really weird way of tending the land versus the indigenous peoples extremely careful tending the land, had this respect for the original, this respect for what the land, there was an intelligence in the land that produced this specific ecosystem here in this specific place. And they didn't try to like impose this whole other land aesthetic that they thought was superior in their heads. So that's what I find so interesting, is the whole idea of human domination versus human cooperation.
We talked about systems too. Our talk was really similar in not in topic exactly, but in kind of approach. And I think it's really at this point now where we are in a frighteningly divided country, to think about what's better for me will be better for my brother. We might disagree, but we are in a system together. And until we start to see that, we can't begin to heal, because everybody can vote their best interests. I mean, you can see what happened in California where, yeah, we're blue, but our voting was completely conservative. We steered away from all the progressive things on the ballot this time because I think we were afraid. And rightly so. We're all suffering with economic and everything. So we didn't vote systemically here. We voted for our personal interests in terms of a state. And I think that until we start to think systemically, that we're not going to be able to deal with climate change or water problems or fire or any of this, because we're only thinking about my little house close to the forest where I want to live. It's yeah.
I think the one thing that moves this society is economics and money. And I just wonder if the whole insurance industry is going to finally help us with the forest fires problem, because no insurer will have rates that people can afford anymore. And so even if the ecologists fail, the money people will help us in the end.
A few weeks ago, or a couple months ago now, the New York Times had an article about that, about how more and more people are living in the WUI, and their places burned down, and then because they have insurance on it, they could rebuild. Except now insurance companies are like, no way, we're losing way too much money on this. So in a weird way, yeah, money interests by privatized organizations are going to kind of help that situation a little bit, which is really backwards, and also part of the reason it happened. But now it's maybe going to shift all because of insurance. So the people that will live there just won't have insurance, and if everything goes away, they won't be able to move back. It's kind of like a weird subsect of this problem.
It was like our economy was just so divorced from geography, and finally the economy comes back down to earth and reconciles with the reality of the earth.
I thought it was also really interesting to note that there is a crisis in trust in government that the article refers to, based on the idea that, or not even the idea, but rather the practice that the management of these forests is not controlled by decision makers at the local level, by the communities that live there, but instead is controlled by policies that are growing out of the society that you're just describing, the financial interests and the corporate systems that define the reality, that are divorced from natural systems, are nonetheless dictating the policy, and how that creates this crisis. And I was thinking of a friend of mine who actually has parents who live in the Sierra Nevada along the Yuba River. And she said, I'm going up to visit them, but it's scary because it's Trump country up there. It's like another place. And just that idea that more local autonomy could perhaps help remedy some of the crisis of trust in government and the value of participating in community through democratic processes. That I was surprised to find that in the reading, and it just felt really resonant today.
There's so many critical reasons why we should be studying this issue right now, and I feel really grateful to get to read these chapters with you all, and I'm hopeful that by the end of this syllabus, I don't know, we'll have covered a lot of different reasons why this is a really important issue for us, you know? Like, I'm looking over our syllabus right now, and I just feel immense gratitude for the fact that we all get to collect and read together and discuss. And, you know, hopefully, like what I intended with the shape of this syllabus is that we'd start with kind of big picture understandings of the issue, and then slowly as we scope towards the middle and end of this syllabus, we're going to really be focusing on Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous perspectives of how to move forward. And from my perspective, and you know, I'm not an expert on fire management. I feel passionate about these issues, but my perspective here is like, we really need to be focusing on Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous land management moving forward, because this system has obviously failed us for so many reasons, but one of them being that like there's a complete lack of understanding of how to connect monetary gains with life, you know, with abundance and with actual life. And that's a really critical flaw, you know, that's something that we have to reconcile moving forward. And by this system, you know, I mean settler colonialism, I mean capitalism, I mean white supremacy, and like naming these crises right now under a blanket of capitalism, I think is really crucial too, to kind of keep that into perspective, or keep that in perspective.
Could you say a little bit more about this report and where it came from and what its effect is? And I kind of just glanced at a little bit, but
Yeah.
like where will its information reach, and how can it help to serve changing policy.
The Little Hoover Commission, formerly known as the Milton Marks Little Hoover Commission on California State Government Organization and Economy, is an independent state oversight agency. By statute, the commission is a bipartisan board composed of 5 public members appointed by the governor, or 4 public members appointed by the legislature, and 2 senators and 2 assembly members. In creating the commission in 1962, the legislature declared its purpose: to secure assistance for the governor and itself in promoting economy, efficiency, and improved services in the transaction of the public business in the various departments, agencies, and instrumentalities of the executive branch of the state government, and in making the operation of all state departments, agencies, and instrumentalities and all expenditures of public funds more directly responsive to the wishes of the people as expressed by their elected representatives. The commission fulfills this charge by listening to the public, consulting with the experts, and conferring with the wise. In the course of its investigations, the commission typically impanels advisory committees, conducts public hearings, and visits government operations in action. Its conclusions are submitted to the governor and the legislature for their consideration. Recommendations often take the form of legislation, which the commission supports through the legislative process.
So I guess like I'd have to know more about this commission because this was formed in 1962. It's not young. I mean, yeah.
It's a good question though, because to me, it begs the question of what is, it really brings into focus the way that California manages its issues and its land and its economy. I mean, the birth of California was marked by the exclusion of indigenous people. I mean, they were not given California citizenship at the start of the state. And you can see in this commission that, you know, it's entirely like erasing this indigenous history that's in California. It's for white Californians, it's for the settler Californians, and it presumes that everything that we need to know to live in California can be determined by people from a certain year onwards, and not the people who've been here for tens of thousands of years. I mean, it would be good if that commission had, if the governor would change that nature of that commission to include indigenous Californians.
Yeah, but that's super complicated now. I mean, yes, definitely it should, but you know, there's such land misuse everywhere now because there's no education. So, you know, like, why not just put a casino where there's, you know, where we own land, or, you know, it's like there's, it's so complicated now in terms of how our relationship with indigenous knowledge, indigenous people, and, you know, how to move forward. And I think it does come down to like basic education. There's so much, the textbook monopoly for so many years, what students learn, you know, what young people learn.
I think this governor's quite progressive in his approach to indigenous people. I'm not sure what previous governors have done, but this one certainly has taken a lot of instruction from some of the experts on California history of indigenous people and things like that.
It's nice to know.
There is also a California, I'm not sure what it is, but it's a committee to look at, I'm not sure exactly whether it's reparations or just historical grievances and things like that, because in June 2019, Newsom issued an executive order, I think, declaring that what happened in California was a genocide, and convened this tribal working group about, you know, how to handle California's indigenous people. So that's some of the background on his involvement in that. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that commission, but there's a specific name for it.
Mm.
Kind of tying in the dialogue of water and the issue of not having enough native oversight at all over how water is managed in California. Part of what the studio does, and part of what I do with the work in Payahunadu or Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals water from, is advocating for having native oversight on the commission, the Water Commission Board, where native tribes in that area have literally no say on how the water is managed. And in fact, they were removed from that political system as, in some ways, a wager to kind of leverage more power. I wish I knew off the top of my head the legal battle that happened, but I could do more research and come back next week with explaining how insidious this issue is there. But one of the major flaws in this system is that, specifically with water management, native tribes are often not only left out of the discussion, but consistently ignored when they do speak up, and consistently not the treaties and promises that were made to how X, Y, and Z, how much water they were supposed to receive, are consistently broken. So it's kind of tying in that like culture, human / nature, forest management issue. It's just water in and of itself has been so manipulated.
I know what you're referring to, Maya, and the battles, and it was that I don't know the name of it either. I can probably find it. I have some papers about it, but yeah, they were just like quick political ideas that happened. Oh, get the Indians out of our way, and without any kind of understanding of the system at all, of the system of how water worked in the land or anything. So yeah, I think it would be good to look back, especially about Owens Valley. That was just, they're almost flippant decisions, like, oh yeah, they're stealing my whatever, get them out of here,
Yeah. And I know, for example, that the Big Pine Paiute tribe has, in the past year, been really heavily lobbying to have a say in the water commissioner meeting and to be a part of the board, to have a tribal section, which there was once. And in one of the last, in May, we had a water commissioner meeting where 150 people came forward saying, not just Owens Valley residents, by the way, Los Angeles residents too, voicing that the Big Pine Paiute tribe and all the Paiute tribes, all the tribes in that region should have political say and a political standing at that board. And they literally completely ignored the ask. And the following meeting, which happened a month ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, they didn't even mention it. Just so frustrating.
I mean, that's why this whole theater of democratic participation and public comments and everything is so dangerous. You know, it can be, it's used as a way of pretense, like, oh yes, we held this open meeting and we held a public comment section, and then cancel. Business as usual.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I think the realities of the ecological breakdown are just encroaching every day into, as people have mentioned in the chat, into public health, into our financial and insurance system, and slowly nature is doing the talking for the indigenous people, I think, and one way or the other, we're going to start coming back.
Yeah. Pushing it to the limit. I was checking through the syllabus because there was a thing that we read that we didn't add in that was specifically about housing. What's it called? My brain is.
Wooey?
Yeah, but the Wooey, the
wild
Wooey
urban
and insurance. You read it, remember? And you
Mhm.
wrote notes about it. I can't find it in here, but I wanted to put it in the chat.
It's a New York Times thing. I don't know if you could just search it by that.
Oh, was that the article?
Oh, the thing I did for that was a scholarly Google Scholar thing. I don't know if we have it. It was in the thing. It was in the thing.
Yeah, so I'm saying I can't find it in there.
Yeah. I don't think I ever ended up reading the whole thing though. I might have taken it off because it was written in like 1995 or something.
Oh.
So did Biden decide not to talk?
He's they're expecting him to talk, but he hasn't shown up to the place yet. And I think that they're secretly being like, we really want there to be an announcement. And they're like stalling, but yeah, I don't know. He isn't there yet, so I don't know when that would happen.
Maya, did you finish the other thing that you were doing with that beautiful yarn?
I did.
Is
Oh
it
no, wait, no, I did not. The one that you
Yeah.
the one that was similar to your yarn. I actually put a pin in it because I have received an order for another bag that is the white one.
Oh my
So
God.
I'm making this one first, and that one's for my mom, the black and white.
So the that yarn, what was it, wool? That
It's actually cotton and linen mixed.
Yeah, I think mine is too. I finished my crazy scarf.
You finished it.
Yeah.
After
Nice.
many years.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy thing. I'll send you pictures. It's like I did all this haphazard knitting and like drop stitches, and like I really purposely made it crazy, and it's this crazy scarf.
Awesome.
But that yarn is so amazing, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to well, I guess I could buy it new because I got it at some thrift store or something. But but that scarf has got like Angora and all kinds of crazy things on it. I keep using that word, but it is a mess. Yeah.
I'd love to see it, Roxanne. That sounds amazing.
Did you see that little video of them playing some kind of dance music and everybody getting up and dancing? And
in New York City?
Is that no, Biden?
Oh,
It's a really dumb. I'll send it to you after. But,
are you hungry? I'm hungry too.
I'm starving.
Yeah. Ansu, I wanted to thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much.
yeah, absolutely. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh no, I'm so glad I've heard about you from like my friends in the Owens Valley Indian Water Commission, like Kendall, Noah and stuff. And I think we might have overlapped on that Department of Water and Power Commission meeting if you were on that.
Okay, so you know all about this. Great.
Yeah. So it's nice to finally join, and I love the idea of doing embroidery again. So I can't wait to start.
It was so great to have you. Yeah, and I.
So did you?
Sorry.
Did you share your email so we can send you an embroidery kit?
Yeah, actually, I sent my mailing address to somebody.
Jen or Cindy. Oh, great. But also, I just wanted to say that I loved the what you talked about water just being thought. Yeah, that was really, really important. And you know,
Yeah, I've got another book reference for you. It's called Is it too late for me to look it up and put it in the chat, or can I just?
I'll wait for you. Go ahead.
It's such a good book. Oh, I know.
I think that understanding of water in our bodies and water in trees and starting to understand that we are all one is
Roger Dunsmore is a poet and a writer, and he works on the Nez Perce reservation. He works in Idaho, and he's got an amazing book where he has spent years teaching in community colleges in reservations all around the West. And anyway, he's got this really amazing book called Earth's Mind. And in it, it's a bunch of critical essays. I don't normally read literature criticism, but this one is really fantastic because he unpacks a lot of writing about Indigenous Americans and their perspectives. So it's called Earth's Mind, and it's by Roger Dunsmore. If you can get a copy of that book, it's so good. There's a beautiful essay in there about how people in this one tribe that he's worked with have tried to explain the integrity of the whole world as they see it.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Right now, yeah.
All right, y'all. It's 10:30 for us, so I think we might hop off.
Yeah, and you guys haven't eaten yet either, right?
Well, we had dinner before, but it was kind of a light veggie dinner, so I think now we're both like
starving,
ready for some cheese and salami and peanut butter.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
See you on soon.
Bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye.